barrage of aircraft navigation disruptions along the Baltic Sea has countries there scrambling to counter another form of what they're calling hybrid warfare, and it's got aeroplane pilots relying more on their training to fly and land their aircraft. A report cited by Swedish public television said that the first 4 months of this year saw around 123,000 incidents of GPS jamming and other disruptions affecting flights in the region. Now, one of the disrupted flights was carrying the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. In August, she was on a tour of countries bordering Russia, Belarus and the Black Sea when interference jammed the plane's GPS system. The pilot circled for an hour and resorted to using paper maps before landing safely in Bulgaria. Bulgaria pointed the finger at Russia and the EU Commission followed suit.
This incident actually underlines the urgency of the mission that the President is carrying out in the frontline member states these days. There she has seen firsthand the everyday challenges of threats coming from Russia and its proxies.
Elisabeth Braw has looked into this. She's a senior fellow with the Atlantic Council's Transatlantic Security Initiative in the Scowcroft Centre for Strategy and Security. Welcome to DW. I suppose we should start by defining our terms. What do we mean when we talk about GPS disturbances? What would a pilot experience?
The good thing is that it's really only the pilot that experiences it. The rest of us sitting, the passengers in the aircraft, don't notice a thing. But the first category of GPS disturbance is GPS jamming, where somebody essentially blocks the signal. So that is serious because they are there for a reason to help pilots and airlines and everybody else involved with the flight know where each aircraft is. The second category, though, is even more serious, and that is GPS spoofing, where somebody distorts the signals and as a result causes the pilots and those involved with the flight to believe that it's somewhere else than what it really is, and not just that flight, but other flights around it.
OK, so in day-to-day car terms, either your sat-nav gets jammed so you don't know where you are, or in the second case, you know where you are, but you're wrong because you're being misled. All of which sounds dangerous. How dangerous is it?
It is incredibly dangerous. The first thing to say is that pilots are trained to fly without GPS. But the reason we have GPS is that aviation should be as safe as possible. So over the decades, the authorities and airlines have come up with different ways of making it safer, and GPS is one of them. It helps pilots and airlines to know exactly where each flight is, and that matters because our skies are so busy. GPS is the reason that we can have these many flights in our airspace, because they know exactly, each pilot knows exactly where his or her flight is and where the other aircraft are. So the fact that somebody is messing with these signals is really serious. And it's important to point out that there is no reason to mess with GPS signals, either to block them or to distort them. Whoever is doing this, and it's likely to be more than one actor, are doing it precisely to cause trouble to international aviation.
OK, so as far as the instances over the Baltics, which we've discussed, are concerned, do we presume that to be Russia?
Yes, we do presume it to be Russia, and we don't just presume. We know that these activities we have essentially I have not, but the authorities have identified where they are coming from, and that is from, for example, Kaliningrad and other locations that contain Russian military bases. Then there are similar incidents in the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, Port Sudan, and we are less sure who is doing it there, but what we know is that it's fairly easy to jam GPS signals. Distorting them requires a degree of sophistication that virtually only nation states would have. OK. And the why, then, is the next question. How does Russia benefit from these malicious actions? And it's important, I suppose, to stress that we're talking about civil aircraft rather than military aircraft. We are indeed talking about civilian aviation, and civilian aviation relies on everybody following the rules because we all fly, or most of us fly, and the whole aviation business is based on goodwill by those involved with it. Because if somebody starts interfering with it, starts causing harm, then there will be accidents, and that would benefit nobody. But what we do know about what Russia, the way Russia behaves these days, increasingly behaves, is that it doesn't care about what's considered polite or the right thing to do or adhering to treaties, that sort of thing. It is intent on causing disruption in our countries, and it's intent on causing us, ordinary citizens, to lose faith in our authorities' ability to protect us from this kind of harm. And so with its interference in GPS, it's showing that you and I and anybody else can be affected, and there's nothing we can do about it. And apparently there's nothing our authorities can do either. And that is an incredibly sinister signal to send, also because it does risk people's lives.
And if we look at that list you gave briefly there, we talk about incidents in the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea, the India-Pakistan border as well, Myanmar and the Black Sea. It looks as though GPS jamming and disruptions has become something of a standard tactic in these geopolitical hotspots.
It does, and I think what has changed is, first of all, that countries and others, non-state actors, have the ability to jam GPS signals. 30 years ago they did not, and now they do. So with every measure we have taken over the decades to increase safety, that has also essentially opened the door for people to use those tools or to try to harm those tools. And that is where we are at the moment. So I think what we'll see in future wars is that state actors and their proxies will continue to try to harm aviation. And one thing to remember in that context is that countries like Russia are not too proud to be seen as essentially engaging in criminal activity. I think 30 years ago, or 40 years ago, the Soviet leaders would have been mortified if we had found out that they were interfering with civilian aviation. Today, Putin essentially says, "I don't care if you know. I don't care if you talk about it," and that is an incredibly dark turn of events.
Thank you for talking us through that, Elisabeth. Elisabeth Braw from the Atlantic Council.
Thank you.